All right. We're here with Dr. Ali Binazir. We've had some great guests, but I'm really excited about this one because you are the first person we've had that's an actual expert in this stuff, not just someone that's out there going on terrible dates, sleeping with a bunch of people. You know your shit. You've written about it. So we're really excited. I was working on an intro for you, but the list is a mile long. You have a million accolades. There's words I did not understand. Do you want to give the people a little bit of background on yourself?
Oh, I get to talk about me. When will I ever stop then? This is the least comfortable thing I'll be doing today. So I mean, briefly, educational background, got a degree in neuroscience from Harvard, went to medical school, went to Cambridge, got another master's degree, and framed them all, and they look really nice on the wall. And now I've been writing personal development, self-help books since 2005, and that's what we do.
Yeah. So I want to start there because I know we don't have a ton of time. It's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode.
You can tell them why.
Yeah. Well, we're going to...
and I was super late.
Joe was late. But hey, CEO duties, right? CEO duties. That's what it is.
Ali.
Joe's doing a bunch of stuff. So and by a bunch of stuff, I mean a million things. But let's start. You have a new book coming out, potentially. Right now it's January 12th or something. Right around February, you're hoping to get it out?
That is the hope. These deadlines have a funny way of receding into the distance. But let's say February, March 2023. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, I actually have a bunch of questions written down.
Superb.
I think, especially in the effort to save some time.
I'm particularly impressed how you've read the book already, even though it's not even out. That's pretty cool.
Hey, I'm good at what I do, So I know it's about the hidden love questions, right? So what are the 5 hidden love questions?
Yeah.
How did you come up with them?
Yeah.
And why are they important for people?
These are excellent questions. So here's the deal. I started doing this stuff in 2005, and since then I've gotten between 5,000 and 10,000 letters from my readers. I don't know exactly what, but let's just say 5,000, right? And once you get that many letters from people, you start noticing patterns. Mm-hmm. So, for example, a person writes in and she says, "Hey, Dr. Ali, I went on this great date. We had such a good time. We made it at the end of the date. It was awesome. I thought we hit off so well. It's been 3 days. He hasn't called or written. What's going on? What should I do?" Or, "Hey, Dr. Ali, I've been with my husband 10 years. We haven't gone it on in 6 months. What should I do?" I'm like, all right, that's interesting. And a lot of other questions of that nature. And you start to notice a pattern that there's a surface question, and then there's like a deeper question below that. And unless you address the deeper question below that, you're never going to be able to solve their problem, right? So the deeper question in this case for every single one of these letters that I got was, am I enough? Mm. And that's the central human dilemma, right? We're hierarchical creatures. We're primates. We're always looking who's above, who's below, what's my rank. So you're always going to be worried about, am I enough? And especially in relationships, that's going to turn up, right? All of our insecurity is going to turn up. And then there was a bunch of other questions that I noticed. So the second one is, am I buying or selling? Am I chasing or am I the one being chased? And so often people forget what their position is. And turns out that if you are chasing, you basically can't win because if you're the one who's doing the selling, then you will sell on the terms of the buyer, right?
Do you feel like that's in every relationship or maybe not to a serious extent?
Yeah.
Do you always feel like there's a chaser and someone that's being chased?
Right. So I'm talking mostly about courtship. So within a relationship, there's a different dynamic. But at the outset, as people are courting one another, there are certain situations in which it's very clear who's buying and who's selling. If you go to a job interview, then if you're being interviewed, guess what? You're the one who's selling. You're saying, "Hey, look at me.
Yeah.
I can do Excel pivot sheets. You should like me." And they're doing the buying. And if they don't like it, they just have somebody else come in and they do another interview, right? But there is socially ambiguous situations in which it's not clear who's buying and who's selling. So dating is one of them. Who's buying? Who's selling? Who knows, right? And evolutionarily speaking, the women are the ones being chased. The guys are the ones doing the chasing. But it's a fluid thing. So what I'm telling my readers is, hey, decide to be the buyer, and then you are. And once you're the buyer, you just have that much more power, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll just go through the 5 questions and what the wrong answers are and what the right answer is. So for the first one, the idea is, am I enough is not a game you can ever win. because what's the upper limit, right? If you does my butt look good in these pants? I don't know. Depends on where you are, right? If you're in Nigeria, it's one standard. If you're in West LA, it's a different standard. So how do you win that? And with this person, maybe you're enough. With this other person, maybe not so much, right? Even with like within your family, with your mom or your dad, it's going to be a different thing. So the key to that is to not even play that game, but instead to think, hey, what if I actually focused on making the people around me feel like $1,000,000, right? Instead of asking, am I enough? You say, hey, how can I be of service? How can I be the light? And just to be clear, this book is pitched towards women just because that's the audience I've been speaking to for the past 10 years or so. But it's really applicable to anybody, right?
Yeah.
So everybody has the opportunity to be of service. You have the opportunity to make somebody feel like $1,000,000 and say, hey, love what you did with that outfit. Wow, amazing setup with the cameras here, whatever, right? Just appreciation. And it's that gift that is an infinite supply, but everybody acts as if it's totally scarce. Like even I forget sometimes, like when's the last time I gave somebody a genuine compliment that made them feel good? So you change the game and then you feel different. And when you give, because we're hypersocial creatures, you feel great, you start to glow. And because you are starting to feel good and glow, then people want to be around you. So loneliness problem solved, not feeling great about yourself problem solved. And now you're glowing, life is good, right? And that was kind of the conclusion of my last book, The Dial of Dating. You told me to bring a copy. It's in the car, I forgot.
That's right, we'll link it in the show notes.
All right,
yeah.
There's more where that came from. So that's 1 and 2. Number 1 is, am I enough? Number 2 is, am I buying or selling? And these are pernicious questions because people don't even know that they're operating in the background, but they're there, right? Yeah. Where if you come on a date and you act like you're the one who's selling, hey, look at me, I'm pretty, I'm cool, you should like me, then that's a situation. And here's another thing. As soon as you put up a profile on a dating site, you are selling. There's no other way, unless you're like really crafty about how you make your profile sound. That's the act of selling right there. And the fact that these profiles look a lot like merchandise you buy on an app is not a coincidence. Number 3 is, am I safe? So psychological and physical safety. And I like to think that the purpose of relationship is the mutual flourishing of the partners, right? And the idea is, if I can be a catalyst to my partner's growth, right, that's a good thing. Otherwise, because if they're doing fine without me, if I'm a hindrance to their growth, what's the point, really? So this idea of catalyzing each other's thriving and growth, it can only happen in the context of safety, psychological and physical safety. Obviously, if somebody's smacking you around, it's not a good setup, right? But less obvious is the psychological safety, right? What if somebody is putting you down? What if somebody is denigrating your work? What if somebody is basically not as supportive as they could be, right? So let's keep that in mind. And this is an important part of the book. It's the biggest part of the book because people forget. People fall in love and they think, oh, but I love him or I love her. I'm like, yeah, but that person's treating you like dirt. That's not cool, right? And you could be doing so much better. And I had to see it with my own eyes to believe it. I had these Harvard classmates of mine, super smart, educated, well-to-do, self-employed. And, one of them was hanging out with this dude who was like a deadbeat, a starving artist, living with her under her roof and beating her up. And I'm just like, are you kidding me, man? Mm-hmm. So this stuff happens to perfectly healthy people who are well-adjusted and have the means, but there's this little glitch in the system, which is when you fall in love, you start doing crazy shit that isn't necessarily great for you.
Yeah.
Number 4 is what I really want. And the crazy thing about these 5,000 letters I got from people was that not one of them actually said what they wanted. They are like, hey, what do you think I should do? Hey, what's your take? I'm like, well, it's just like you saying, hey, where do you think I should go? I don't know. Yeah, if you give me an address, I can tell you where to go. But if you don't have a destination, I can't give you useful directions. So it turns out the punchline to that is what you want doesn't matter nearly as much as what you need. Mm-hmm. And what people want varies. It's like, I want a guy who's like 6'2" or taller. Okay, great. Educated. Okay, fine. Makes X amount of money. Fine. Like spicy food, sure, whatever, right? Turns out none of that shit really matters. And what actually matters is completely different. And turns out that our needs are actually pretty similar. What people need is almost the same for everybody, right? Food, shelter, clothing, and good companionship. And what's good companionship? basically somebody who has your back. So we're talking like 17 years of studying this stuff and dispensing dubious advice. It comes down to one thing. Does this person have your back? And that can come in any number of packages, right? So I read this really cool book recently. It's called Don't Trust Your Gut, which is a lot of the message of what I'm giving. It's by this guy, Seth Stevens-Davidowitz. He was like one of the chief data officers of Google. This guy knows data, right? So, he looks at these studies. There's this lady, Professor Samantha Joel, and she took like very large data sets and scrunched them all together to figure out, okay, what does actually matter for relationship satisfaction, right? And she came up with this list of 8 things, which Seth Stevens-Davidowitz called the irrelevant 8. These are the things that absolutely do not matter. And here's a crazy thing. They're also the things that all the dating apps, all the sites optimize for. So you guys want the list?
Please.
Yeah. This is
Number 1.
super fascinating, but yes.
Number 1, race, ethnicity does not have any correlation with relationship satisfaction. Number 2, religion, no correlation. Height, women are big on height, does not matter. Occupation does not matter. Attractiveness, like you're like, I want somebody who's hot. Turns out it doesn't really matter all that much. Previous marital status, apparently that doesn't matter. Sexual tastes, and finally, similarity to self. And these are exactly the things, and look, I am as guilty as anybody, right? I mean, I'm particular to the hilt, but turns out none of this shit matters. And there's like 5 things that actually do matter, and they all have to do with like character, right?
So I want to ask you, before we continue, because this is probably my favorite interview so far, because we always talk about analytics and meeting in person and dating apps stuff, but we don't really know. We just look at stuff online and our own personal experience. But you're actually a doctor on this stuff, and you could back this all up and give such a unique perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Those 8 things you just rattled, we always say, from what we understand, is that in order to really connect with somebody, it has to be done in person, right? Some of that's just us selling it and marketing.
Yeah.
It's also from experience. But I actually believe that, and I want to hear your perspective from what you just said about those 8 things about what we think we need versus meeting somebody in person and feeling maybe a connection or someone having your back, what you just said.
Totally.
Do you think, like, when does that come along, and do you believe that needs to happen in person? And can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably why Steve and I hit it off when we first spoke, because I'm all about the in-person thing. And 300,000 years of Homo sapiens evolution did not happen in the presence of video cameras, apps, any of that, right? It was all face-to-face. And we're all designed to discern certain things about one another, which can only be done in real time in person. So you can't smell somebody online, right? And smell's like a huge part of compatibility in courtship, right? Whether you're going to have miscarriages or not is about whether the other person smells right because their immune system is compatible with yours or incompatible with yours, right? So, and another thing is you see whether this person plays well with others. You can't do that online, right? You got a little picture. It could be anybody's picture. It could be retouched. Could be 10 years ago. Could be 50 pounds ago. Could be anything. But what you want to do is you want to have this real-time interaction with someone. And these days I'm actually kind of against dates too, just like the standard idea of a date, because it's so contrived. There's nothing in human history that says, you, me, back behind palm tree, we talk. Right? That's not how things went, right? You basically had a pretty longitudinal picture of what somebody was like, unless it's an arranged marriage between 2 tribes, in which case it all goes out the window. It's like the king sees the portrait, the oil portrait of the princess. Yes, this one. And then, of course, she shows up. She doesn't look anything like her portrait. That happened, right?
Bad artist. That's what.
Yeah, exactly. Off with his head. So what you want to do is you want to have as close to a real life interaction with that person as possible. So have them in context with your friends, with family, amongst other people. Does this person, how well do they treat the wait staff? Because that's how you know whether this person is actually like this. So that's why I recommend people do activities that give you longitudinal exposure to somebody, like night classes, right? You show up at the same time, week after week, you get to see what this person's actually like, or cooking class, or run club. I mean, there's all these things that you could be doing, repeated casual contact. Because as soon as you're on a date, you're performing, right? Even Chris Rock's talked about it's like, I'll send my representative talk, your representative, 3 months later, we can both show up, right? Something like that. So he does a lot better. But the idea is, yeah, you want to be in person, and you want to see what people are like, and also you want to give people a chance. Because when have you and I ever been our best, most authentic self on a first date? I mean, there's so much pressure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that leads perfectly into my next question, is that in this world of so much technology, right? I don't know how we evolved into the next best thing. What are your thoughts on our exposure to so many options through dating apps, through technology? And like you just said, right? Giving somebody that actual chance to not prove themselves, but to find a connection instead of instantly saying, there's nothing here, what's better? And even if there is something great there, still what's better? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm actually doing something along those lines myself. You can call it an experiment, you can call it, social club, but I've gathered a bunch of people, and I've been hosting events for the past 18 months. I've hosted 102 events where people just show up, right? So like last night we had a happy hour, and people just came and just hung out, and you get a sense for what these people are over time. You see them over and over again. Conversations can vary, but the point is there's no agenda. You're just there to hang out and chill and see if you vibe with people. So I'm thinking that if we want this to actually serve people, the way it should be is through group activities for like-minded people. And there are some apps that do similar stuff like that. So there's this Locals app that's recent, it came up in London and LA. Meetup does that to a certain extent, but probably could be much better execution. But you can, but there's also places like, say, Neue House or Soho House where you have a certain kind of demographic, they show up. So like-minded people doing social things together, repeat exposure, and also just getting, I think what's really important is to establish some idea of an ethos, some kind of behavioral standard. It's like, okay, in this community, we are reflexively and by default nice to each other. We're welcoming. You talk to people. You don't dismiss them. And also you behave well. And that allows people to have that psychological safety, which lets their true self show up. So
yeah,
awesome.
Is that what your app does?
We're trying, and I think it's difficult because we are still bridging a gap of dating apps, right, in the new world. And in my personal opinion, I wish none of the dating apps existed, and I just wish it was all organic, right?
Yeah.
But it's just moved so far to fully being a dating app that we're trying to bridge that gap the best we can. And then you bring up the safety issue, right? Like, that's probably the one hurdle we're trying to solve most, is making people feel safe meeting without really knowing who that other person is. What do you think about that? And just being human beings and our safety.
Totally. I mean, I have a little rant about, it's called dating apocalypse. So why dating apps are wrecking your love life. And that's a big part of it, because at no time in history prior to this, were you able to just pluck somebody out of the ether who has no connection to anybody or anything, and just say, oh yeah, sure, I think it's a good idea to go out with this person. So I guess in big cities it has been possible, but not nearly as pervasive and not in your pocket. So Hinge had the right idea for a while, and they said, hey, we'll introduce you through friends. So we'll only show you friends of friends. And I don't think that it does that anymore.
No,
but some mechanism of having an introduction procedure, some back connection to your own network, I think is very useful. I also think that the future is going to involve some kind of social score for people, not China style, but more something like
a blue check on Instagram.
Yeah, this guy's a trustworthiness score. I mean, people have a credit score, right? And that's how a lot of the financial industry operates. So how about a trustworthiness score? And I think there's some kind of Facebook group dated him in LA. Did you date this guy? Or something like that. So women talk about, oh, I'm dating him too. So, but that's how a little bit of accountability goes a long way towards discouraging the bad actors. And look, any environment where there's a lot of opportunities to do crazy shit and get away with it is going to have bad actors.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, most of the bad actors are men. And also, look, women, they should be more vigilant, because guys can do a lot of damage. All it takes is one really toxic rando to wreck your life for good. So this is part of the reason why these apps are so dangerous, is because that's where they live, right? People have watched this movie called The Tinder Swindler, and that's only one of many cases of stuff that's happened. And every woman I know has some kind of story of terribleness about something that happened online, whether it's just like a brief insult or like genuine damage to their lives. So,
and I think even that brief insult could do more damage than the guy even knows to that.
Absolutely. Woman. And look, you go on these apps and they make your soul grow old just because there's so much incivility. People are at their worst when they're driving and when they're online. I know about the driving thing because as soon as I'm in my car, I'm like a swearing mofo and it's like, get out of my way. So, but online, I mean, nobody's that they're on their best behavior. So the less exposure you have to that, the better. And look, it's the same people. It's one planet Earth, right? But you put them there, they're going to be at their worst. They're going to be snarky. They're going to be mean. They're going to be dismissive. And they're going to give you like, 0.2 seconds as opposed to like what courtship used to take like months to years, right? And now it's just like, swipe, gone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I had this, for example, a friend of mine. For guys, it's really tough. So apparently match rates for women are around 10% on the apps.
Nailed
for guys,
I just did the analytics last week, but that was spot on.
Yeah, 10.1% for women. For guys, it's 0.5%. 1 in 200.
Yeah, we had 0.6, but yeah.
Yep, same. There you go.
Crazy.
Yeah, so 1 in 200, right? How much frustration is that? So, I'm an average looking guy, but I can tell you, not once in my lifetime have I said hi to a woman and have her not say hi back. It's just not done, right?
Well, you're not average looking, but it's
very kind of you.
It's crazy that I think most people don't understand that you always hear the story of, oh, you're married to this person, but he's normally not my type. And it's like, well, what's normally not your type? You're just attracted to him because you heard him speak and you felt his energy and his beliefs and how he treated people. Yeah. And that's what you're attracted to. You're not attracted to your type. There is no type.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And the other thing I tell people in my seminar is like, oh, so you have a type and you've dated that type your whole life and you're here at this single seminar. So how's that working for you? Perhaps it's time to try a different dish. So the thing is, the 5 things that actually matter, I think, are pretty important. You guys want to know what actually matters? Yeah. All right, here we go. Accountability. Does this person show up? Do they say what they're going to do? I mean, turns out it matters. Self-awareness. Does this person know what their issues are? What their limits are, or who they are really, right? Kindness. Who knew, right? Kindness actually matters. Optimism and resilience. So those are the 5 things that actually matter. And these are intangible qualities you cannot convey via a thumbnail, a 3-line profile, or even 5 dates, right? It takes like actual attention and courtship time and getting to know someone and making that investment. But there's so much false choice coming at people in from so many different directions that there's like trying to and the false choice doesn't make anybody happy because it makes it hard to make the decision because you have too many choices. Once you make the decision, you're like, oh, but what about number 45? That one would have been so much better. And then afterwards, you're going to have buyer's remorse too, because it's like, oh, well, this one worked out, but gosh, those 200 that I turned down, what about that, right? So this this exuberance, this proliferation of false choice is not making anybody happy. Even for the ladies who, I saw this friend of mine, she's like, 34 years old, tall, good looking, well-to-do, and she got on one of these apps, and within 36 hours, she had, I swear to God, 150 matches. I'm like, what do you do with the 150 matches, right? And that's a problem because how do you sift through that? You can't go out with all of them, and these guys are matching, but they're not responding. So she's feeling left out too, even though she has like literally dozens of choices, but false choices. They're not real. So
yeah. So I want to ask you that after your first book focused more on men, and from then on has it been more of a female focused?
Yeah, it turns out that women actually read books and also seek out, like with the guys, I tell them about my book, like, oh yeah, whatever. Then like go behind my back and sneak and buy it.
We have the same issue with the app. When we go out promoting the app, women are so receptive in such a genuine way. And men are so aggressive and anti the app.
That's funny.
But then they'll go download it behind our back. So
There you go.
That's like the Drake lyric where they say the guys will get 2 and claim they got it for their sister.
Nah.
But, yeah, don't listen to it all
No,
the time.
it's true because it's like, well, you're trying to say I need help in this domain. I mean, come on. So that's part of the issue. But also, women actually respond to this stuff, right? So why would I want to speak to a bunch of people who are not into the idea? And women don't just buy one of these books; they buy all of them. So that's why I've been focusing on women's the women's version of the book, The Dial of Dating for Women, and yeah. Also, who would I rather be speaking to? A room full of lovely ladies or a bunch of smelly dudes? So there's that.
Yeah.
So,
and you yourself, are you single right now?
I am single.
Okay. And I feel like this is a dumb question because you hear it a lot. Why are you single? Right.
Right,
But
right.
For someone that spends their whole life on this stuff,
Yeah.
what are you missing? What are you looking for? That whole thing.
Yeah. So one of the side effects of writing about this stuff, thinking about it for years on end, is that you become somewhere along the lines of like picky to almost phobic, because you see something you're like, oh man, that is so not going to work out. So I don't even start, right? I'm not necessarily proud of this, but that's part of it, because I read so much about things that can go wrong and all the misery that's inflicted upon people, all these stats about divorce. And I'm like, wow, I really don't want to be part of that. And to those of the other guys who may identify with this issue out there, and the ladies too, look, we have no choice but to take risks. You just have to jump in and see what happens, right? Nobody's going to be a perfect match. Everything's going to be a compromise. So, my mantra, my resolution for this year is, hey, see what happens, right? Go for the experiment. If it's not lined up, of course, don't get crazy with it, right? I'm also highly distrustful of this idea of falling in love. It's happened to me before. I've seen it happen to people close to me, like parents. And I'm like, did that necessarily result in a good match? I'm not sure, right? And so limerence is a technical term for falling in love. And basically it's a state of acute intoxication. Everybody knows it. It's in poems, it's in plays. And yet when it happens to them, it's like, well, no, but for me, it's special. This person is awesome. This is it. This is the love of my life. Let's do this. So a combination of that makes me probably warier than the average person. At the same time, I try to keep an open mind. And
yeah, but also I think one of the most important things, and this is just my personal belief, is, being non-needy, right? Not needing a partner, not needing a relationship. I feel like, do you consider yourself non-needy? I would assume if you're not.
Yeah, I've never really thought about getting married for 5 consecutive minutes of my life. So you'll say, why aren't you married? I'm like, I don't know. It just never occurred to me, right? I think partnership is great. And yeah, as you said, people are in different parts of the spectrum when it comes to relationship, wanting, needing, tolerance, stuff like that. So yeah, but this is like a therapy session I would normally pay a lot of money for. So thank you. It's good. It's good.
Lay down if you want to.
So someone mentioned this to me about a month ago, and they said that through your life, on average, you will seriously date, I guess meaning at least a month, 11 people.
Okay.
And that the first 3 are usually not going to work because you're figuring out what you actually want.
Yeah.
Person 4, 5, and 6, one of those people are very highly likely to be your best match throughout your life, because if you go past 6 and get to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, you're being so picky and overanalyzing, like you just said, that then you start to realize person 8, 9, and 10 is not as good as person 4, 5, and 6, and you missed the boat on 4, 5, and 6, that now you're kind of, I don't know where you're at now, but how do you feel about that?
Yeah, look, there's this in computer science, there's this algorithm called exploit versus explore, right? And the idea is you have a space, whether it's the space of all possible restaurants you can eat at tonight, or the space of the cereals you can pick from at a supermarket, right?
Netflix shows gets me all the time.
Exactly, right? So Netflix shows, precisely. So first you want to explore a little bit, see what's out there. But eventually, you want to commit to something so you can exploit, and exploit in the nicest way possible, meaning you actually benefit from the product, right? You eat the cereal, you watch the Netflix show, you have the dinner at the place, or you have a partner and you have a relationship, right? The problem with being a maximizer, which is what a lot of people do, and which is what the apps incline people to do, is you're in perpetual explore mode. And if you're in perpetual explore mode, it's like you're in the food court, you keep on rotating around the food court, and you don't commit until all the shops close. And now you're still hungry, right? So at a certain point, you need to commit. And there is a mathematical optimum for this. It's 37%. So you basically decide what the total space is you're going to search. So say, okay, 100 guys or 100 girls I'm going to go out with, right? And then you go out with 37 of them without 37% of that space without deciding, right? Just kind of see what's there. But you make a note of the best choice. And then after that, the first one that's as good or better than your best choice, you just commit and you're done. And you can't do better than that unless you go through all 100, right?
Wow.
So, but the point is, that's just like a little mental Band-Aid for people who are obsessive and they're like, oh, I need to make the best decision. The point is to make a best decision. And what I recommend is this procedure called satisficing. So satisficing, Herb Simon was this like genius economist, psychologist, computer scientist who came up with this term. It's the mashup of satisfy and suffice. So something that's like good enough, right? And the idea is you go to Cheesecake Factory, they've got this 30-page fucking menu. It's like 6,000 words. And you can go through the whole thing. It'll take you half an hour. Or you can just go and say, the first thing, okay, that sounds good enough, and you order it. That's satisficing. Maximizing is going through the whole thing. Satisficing is you pick that first thing. So I read that the first time I read it, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. I'm like, that's it. So that's how I go. That's how I do at restaurants now. And basically the idea is if you want to be happy, be a satisficer. Decide what your standards are. The first thing that fulfills those, commit and be done, because commitment is what actually makes people happy. It's the actual eating of the dinner, the ice cream, watching of the Netflix show, the thing, as opposed to perpetual search mode.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, perpetual search mode is a huge problem in dating. But meals are over in an hour, a show's over in an hour.
No.
How do you balance that with like relationships?
Exactly right. So this is the biggest decision that people make in their lives. Choice of a partner. And you want to be thorough. You want to actually figure out who this person is. So I encourage everybody, not just the ladies, but particular ladies, to do like a literal background check. There's like this site called Spokeo, Spokeo. You go on there and it tells you who this person is. You want to go on LinkedIn. You want to talk to their friends, their family, and then you want to have a pretty good interview and figure out what this person is like. Put them in various situations. Go on a hike. Go to the zoo, see how they interact with animals. I don't know, whatever matters to you, make sure you have a thorough vetting period. There is no substitute for a long courtship. So, and look, if somebody's good enough to be a long-term partner, be a fiance, you can prolong that until you actually have a good sense of who somebody is. And still it can go wrong. I mean, we were just talking about the divorce rate hovering somewhere around 50%, right? But I'd like to think that if people delay marriage and they have extended courtships, they'll do a lot better. And just to be able to look at things with a more discerning eye.
Yeah, and we're not even saying, like we always say, like we don't recommend people get married or not. Whatever your preference is, and we think both are great. But I don't know if you're too familiar with Jay Shetty.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of him, listen to him every day. And he said something that caught my eye, right? And it was that Hollywood gives you this vision of love, right? That it's this fairy tale and everything is perfect, right? And if you don't have that perfect fairy tale, then you're not in love. Yeah. And he said that it ruins love because love is like learning and going through really hard times with somebody and seeing if you could grow together and get through that. And, that to me really stuck because that to me is love. And I think it's way more important. And Hollywood kind of gives you this false narrative of what love is.
Yeah, the movies. They're not real, but in also fairy tales, Disney, I mean, all that stuff. And the funniest part is all of them end at the marriage. Like, oh, and then they got married happily ever after. It's like, no, that's where the hell begins. That's where the pain starts, dude. What are you talking about? Happily ever after. So yeah. And also just the whole Western romantic narrative that you're supposed to fall in love. You're supposed to have this person who fulfills all your needs. And there's a great book by Eli Finkel. I think he's a pen. It's called the All or Nothing Marriage. And he talks a lot about that. How marriage standards have changed significantly. There's another book by Stephanie Kuntz about the history of marriage. And it just wasn't this way. People got married because you got two tribes and it makes sense for the tribes to like join forces, or two kingdoms, or it's arranged. And there you go. And that's that. You don't even know each other. Right? You've seen each other once from behind a little bit of a shade. So now that we have the opportunity, I think it's important to actually give people the time to show who they really are. And look, doesn't mean you stick around for somebody who's toxic. My simple rubric is this: do you feel like a better version of you around this person on a consistent basis, right? So when I'm around somebody who is good for me, I feel more expansive. I feel I can crack my stupid jokes and be safe. I feel like I can be more generous, right? When I'm around somebody who's not good for me, I'm snarkier, I'm smaller, I'm meaner. And I'm like, I'm kind of the same, but this environment is changing me. So what's in this environment that's different? Turns out it's that person. So, and sometimes that person who makes you feel like the best version of you does not come in the packaging that you expect.
I love that. That was probably one of the best responses we've ever had on the show. And I think it goes back to what you said way back in the beginning of making the person you're with feel valued and, I guess, safe. Even, and I think it's interesting, like, even when you're on a date with somebody, you know you're not really going to see it long term, at least in that moment, kind of making them feel special in a genuine way of like, I just value the time we're spending together. And, you know, if nothing happens, whatever, let's just enjoy it and have a good time.
Yeah. And also, I when I interact with people, I take the 30-year view. It's like, I am going to deal with you right now such that in 30 years, you'll still be in my life. And I can look back on it and say, oh, okay, I'm happy with the way I dealt with you, because everybody's great in their own way. Doesn't have to be my future wife. In fact, probably of that so far is exactly zero. So, but who are you really? What are you about? And approaching people with genuine curiosity. And that's one of the reasons why limerence and falling in love is so dangerous, because that's not about the other person at all. It's all about you. It's like, you are my crack pipe in human form, and I need you now. And I mean, people say that, and it's in these movies. I need you, right? How is that supposed to be flattering? So once you're in a long-term relationship, well, yes, you lean on each other, and it's okay. You will need each other, and that's great. But as an opening salvo, as like the thing that draws you together, we like to think that people are complete, and then they come together and they create something that's bigger than the sum of their parts.
So cool.
Yeah. I love this because I have a little list of qualities, and I think a lot of this is ringing true. So qualities I look for in a partner. So it's giving me confidence in my list. But Sweet. We want to be respectful of your time because it's about 6:15 right now. I know you got to get to the concert.
We go a little longer. I mean, it's all
right, great. This is good. Why don't you tell Ali the six, or is it 6 things you look for in a partner? Or
I could pull up the list.
Yeah,
I haven't touched it up in a while.
Hear from you guys. I mean, you're developing this app's going to mold a bunch of people's lives and behaviors. So what's the secret sauce going into it?
Yeah, let me find it real quick. I have a million notes on my phone here. But yeah, I'm thinking down the road, maybe we do some sort of live show with your audience, our audience.
Yeah, like I said, this is probably my
Sure. I mean, look, I do seminars, I do talks, I do workshops. I mean, the five hidden love questions. That's I have a workshop around it, and people sit and they think about these things, because it's one thing for people to cognitively understand. Oh yeah. I don't want to be the seller. I want to be the buyer. But what does that actually mean? Yeah. What do you do differently now, right? Do you like uncross your legs and cross them this way, and now suddenly you're the buyer? Or is it something more subtle? Is it more like, no, just go and delete all those apps and now do things completely differently? Now you throw dinner parties. Now you vet people. And also when you're in that buyer mode, right, it's like you're doing due diligence. Yeah. You're becoming more discerning, as opposed to, oh, somebody gave me the time of day. Great. Let's go with it. Right. Which can happen.
Yeah. Okay. So you can feel free to interject at any point.
Now. Okay.
Yeah. So I've been meaning to update the wording a little bit, but I'll just read it how it is. So the first one is kind, thoughtful, and considerate. Put that on the first line.
All right. Good.
Okay. Laughs a lot, silly, great sense of humor. And that everything kind of goes both ways. Like I can be that way and she would be that way. I have to like her in addition to loving her. I need to work on the wording of this one, but I feel like liking someone is more important because it's more of a choice.
Yeah.
Right? Want to be around her after we have sex, especially the first time, I think is a telltale sign, right? Where it's like, was this just a primal
Standards, man.
Yeah. Well, just in terms of like, sometimes there's a primal, like, you know, you're really attracted to somebody. And after I have sex with them, oh shit, I don't really like this person. It's just more of a physical,
Yeah.
you know. So I think that's more of like a primal feeling that I'll know right away.
Good.
Wants me but doesn't need me. We're both good by ourselves. And this is, I need to work on the wording of this one, but it's kind of what you just said about, you know, the sum being greater than the parts. So like it's a 1 + 1 = 3 type of thing.
Okay.
We can go anywhere, like any situation, and I don't have to like worry about her, and she does great on her own. Or not that I'm gonna leave her in a corner, but like, you know, she can hold her own. We both have our own lives that we come together and share, but like we each have stuff going on. And then this one is, I always call it a bonus. And I've asked people a lot about this recently, but potentially having separate beds and or separate bedrooms.
Amazing. It's a thing, man. Because I've thought about that too. So, because yeah, it just gives you better quality of sleep, and also, how will you ever know if they want to be in your bed, right?
True.
So interesting. Well, it's a solid list. Very good. And the shorter the list is, the better, because although all of those sounded great, what you want to do is we want to have like the bare minimum list, and then from there, the idea is to let in people who qualify. And you also want to have a deal breakers list. Mm-hmm. So, for example, drug addicts, probably not going to work out, right? Alcoholic, probably not going to work out. So but the shorter the list is better, the more inclusive.
That's probably when people say, "Why are you single?" Like, check out my fucking list.
Yeah. And you also neglect to mention scorching hot. But hey, it's all good. It's all good. Look, I will acknowledge freely that guys are kind of superficial, right? I mean, we have our types and we go for it. So I read this list and it says attractiveness does not matter. I'm like, really, man? Are you kidding me? So I do recommend that you go out with people that you are attracted to, because that is like that root chakra, that like sexual attraction, that's the basis of the human race propagating itself, right? And if you don't have it on day one, chance of that coming online later on, who knows, right? And also a lot of it's smell, and just make sure the other person smells right.
Yeah, well, can you talk more about that? Because you said that earlier, and I wasn't sure if you were being serious.
No,
like,
this is
a because you said with a miscarriage, right?
Yeah, so the science is very clear. So here's the deal. When people smell each other,
is that pheromones? Sorry to cut you off, but is that...
Humans strictly don't have pheromones, so that can get very technical as to what constitutes a pheromone, what does not. A pheromone is going to be the same for all members of the species, and these smells are different for each person, so it's technically not a pheromone. But it is something that we're detecting, and probably via smell. And what it's correlating with is the makeup of your immune system. So if you find somebody whose immune system is different from yours, you will find that person's smell more attractive. Because supposedly you will have children whose immune systems are now a complement, a hybrid of these two different systems, and they're going to be stronger, right? And if there's incompatibility, then there's a lot of compatibility, then you're not a good match. And that's when things get weird. And I read somewhere that even miscarriage rate goes up. But yeah, there is something about smell correlating with some actual chemical idea of compatibility at the level of the immune system. So do not, this is why you don't want to like wear too much cologne. You don't want to wear too much perfume. You want your actual smell to be something that people can detect at close range.
I don't even wear deodorant when I'm with Hannah. Maybe that's why she loves me so much. It's my natural stink.
There you go. No, and look, I'm sure you've both had girlfriends who like stole your t-shirts and your sweatshirts and like, what the hell's going on here? And they're just like, yeah, I know. Okay, sure. Yeah. But it's a thing. It's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before you have to go, I just wanted to ask one more question, because I think it's like a hot topic now and kind of the way the world's moving, but this like toxic man, right?
Ooh.
And like for me personally, like I said I love Jay Shetty, and I love this kind of new wave of men who are able to be more expressive and try and understand women more.
Yeah.
And I think that, I try and emulate that in my life, and getting to know you now in this past 45 minutes seems that you're very much on that Jay Shetty type of realm. So yeah, like how do you see the world like, do you see men kind of transforming more to become more genuine, or do you think that the toxic man is so biological and so masculine?
What do you mean by genuine? What do you mean by toxic? So let's just make should be clear
I guess
that
just like you take someone like Andrew Tate, or you take someone like Jay Shetty, and I think like it doesn't matter what you're saying. There's just an approach to saying it, right? So more of like a genuine, like understanding and trying to mold your beliefs with a woman's and trying to understand them more versus just coming at things aggressively.
All right. Well, I'll give you my framework. So the Tao of dating is called that because it's based on Taoism, and Taoism is all about the interaction of the yin or the yin and the yang. So yin being feminine energy and yang being masculine energy. And the way the world works, the whole universe, yin and yang are perfectly balanced. It's like protons and electrons. There's no excess of protons or electrons or vice versa. Otherwise, the whole thing would just fly apart into space. So we have that in ourselves too, right? And I also teach public speaking, and I talk about the idea of balancing strength and warmth, which is basically the same thing as yang, strength, warmth, yin, right? And you get power, you get real charisma when you balance the strength and the warmth. If you have a lot of strength, you need to counterbalance with a lot of warmth, right? If you have a whole bunch of strength but no warmth, you're basically a bully. That's no good. If you have a lot of warmth but not a lot of strength, you're a wuss, not attractive. If you have both, boom. Now you got Bill Clinton, right?
Okay.
So I'm not familiar with the second guy you mentioned, but I've heard of toxic masculinity and the men's movement, all this stuff, and those guys are over-indexing a little bit on the yang, on the masculine energy, right? And that gets out of hand, and it's not balanced. It needs to be balanced, right? And it needs to be balanced by what? By kindness. So in my book, I talk about by heart and spine. So if you're all spine and no heart, well, that's a bully, and that's not attractive, and that's not fun. But if you have a lot of heart but no spine, also not great, right? But when you have heart and spine, now you are a good man, and that's the kind of thing that not just women like, but men like too, and that's who you want to be around.
Well, I'm glad I asked, and I'm glad you made me clarify what we were talking about, because the answer was kind of what I was hoping. Didn't even think that answer was out there, but the answer you gave is great, and what I kind of think is perfect, right? That balance. We always talk about balance. So yeah, that analogy of heart and spine and not having too much of one or the other, that's pretty cool.
And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before with the internet. I don't know if it was on the show or before Joe got here, but how the internet just kind of like, I feel like the internet creates such a competitive atmosphere that the word toxic masculinity and toxic and gaslighting, all these fucking terms just get thrown around with no real use, and you just hear them and they get more embedded into the culture. So I feel like the biggest thing is the competitive environment. And then my biggest takeaway from this podcast is that I've been saying yang wrong for my entire life.
Saying what wrong?
Yang.
Well, I mean, if you bring a Chinese person, I'm probably saying you're wrong too. But I know that yin is pronounced in Chinese, not yin. There's a yin there, but yeah, it's approximately yang. Yeah.
Okay, I've been saying yang my whole life. But yeah, this we want to let you go. This has been amazing. One thing before you go, I will ask because I don't know how many books you've written, but let's say for guys and for women, what book should they start with? Because I am 100%. I know you say guys don't read them, but I'm going to read this shit out of it.
You can't find my book online for men, so that's that. But there's a really good book on dating in general, which I think the lady who wrote it did a very good job. It's called How to Not Die Alone. And I forget the lady's. Anyway, I forget her name, but she was like, she works at Match. She has access to much data. It's a pretty good book. And so my book for women is called The Tao of Dating: The Smart Woman's Guide to Being Absolutely Irresistible, available on Amazon and on Audible in ebook, print, and audio form. And the next one's going to be called The 5 Hidden Love Questions: How to De-Sabotage Your Dating. So
nice. And that's Logan. I don't know if it's Yuri or Uri, but
Logan Yuri, yeah. Logan Yuri. She's great.
But yeah, this has honestly been amazing. I wish we had you for another hour or two, but
Well,
we'll have
hey,
to do it
we
again.
live in the same town, man.
Yeah.
All good.
Yeah, we got to do this again.
Dr. Ali.
And I'll be early next time.
Yeah, it's all good.
Sweet.
You'll have
Good
an
times.
assistant. Next time you'll have an assistant doing these little
Gentlemen.
tasks for you. But Dr. Ali Binazir.
Oh, yeah, you guys owe me
thank
some
you so
like
much.
very expensive green tea. So
Yeah, we're going to get it shipped directly from Japan. So, dude, thank you so much for coming on. This is awesome.
And have a great time at the Philharmonic tonight.
yeah, should be a good concert.
Awesome. Man. Appreciate you.
All right, good times.